I still remember the day I first saw it. The shuttle windows framed its impossible scale against the void, a moon made by men. Our moon, my new home, the Death Star. They called it the ultimate power in the universe. They never mentioned it would devour us first. The gleaming white shuttle bay swallowed us whole. 200 fresh transfers from the Imperial Academy, all of us wide-eyed, necks craned upward at the cavernous hangar that could have housed an entire Star Destroyer. TIE fighters hung in perfect rows from ceiling racks. Stormtroopers stood at attention in formation so precise they might have been stamped from the same machine. Everything polished, everything perfect. Everything wrong. I am Lieutenant Arik Solon, Systems Engineer, identification number IS55927, and this is my testimony, though no one will likely hear it. Records have a way of disappearing aboard this station, just like people. That first day, they separated us by division. Engineering Corps taken to the right, operations to the left, security details straight ahead. Commander Dre, a tall man with a face like weathered stone, addressed us with cold efficiency. You serve aboard the most significant technological achievement in galactic history. Your performance will reflect this significance. Failure to meet standards will result in immediate reassignment. Dismissed. No welcome, no tour, just the metallic echo of boots on Durasteel and the certainty that we had entered something vast and hungry. I followed my guide, another lieutenant with eyes that never quite met mine, through corridors that seemed to breathe. The environmental systems created a constant whisper, like something alive in the walls. We passed stormtroopers at every junction, their blank helmets revealing nothing, yet somehow watching everything. My quarters were small but private, a privilege of rank, a narrow bed, a desk terminal, and a viewport that offered a slice of stars. When the door closed behind me, silence was total. Engineered perfection. I sat on the edge of the bed and felt the subtle vibration of the station through the floor. The heartbeat of the beast I now inhabited. Sleep did not come easily that first night. The air tasted recycled, sterile in a way that made my throat itch. The temperature remained constant, yet I felt cold, and beneath it all, that vibration. Rhythmic, waiting. Morning arrived with the harsh buzz of my comm unit. Orientation would begin at 0600 hours. I dressed in my fresh uniform, the fabric still stiff, the rank insignia catching the light. In the small mirror above my sink, I hardly recognized myself. Something in my eyes had changed. Just one night aboard, and already the station had begun its work on me. The orientation took place in a vast circular chamber dominated by a holographic display of the station itself. Officers from various divisions filled the room, all of us new, all of us uncertain. Director Krennic himself addressed us, his white uniform immaculate, his voice carrying an authority that seemed to press against my chest. "You are now part of history," he said, his eyes sweeping the room. "The Death Star represents not just military might, but the inevitable triumph of order over chaos. Each of you has been selected because you represent the best the Empire has to offer. Do not disappoint us." The hologram shifted, showing internal schematics of the station. Reactor cores, weapons systems, life support. My area of responsibility would be power distribution subsystems for the equatorial regions. Complex work, but well within my capabilities. What troubled me was not the assignment, but the way Krennic spoke of the station. Not as a weapon or a vessel, but as an ideal made real. A philosophy of fear cast in Durasteel and Kyber. After the briefing, I was taken to my duty station deep within the station's mantle. The power distribution center was a maze of terminals and monitoring stations. Engineers and technicians moved with purpose, their faces set in expressions of intense concentration. My immediate superior, Chief Engineer Vanth, barely acknowledged me before assigning my terminal and tasking me with diagnostic review protocols. "The system tolerates no inefficiencies," he said, his voice flat. "Report any anomalies immediately. Do not attempt independent corrections without authorization." The workday stretched for 14 hours. Standard for the station, I was told. When I finally returned to my quarters, exhaustion dragged at my limbs, but my mind refused to quiet. The vastness of the station, the thousands of systems, millions of components, all working in horrible harmony. And for what purpose? We had been told it was a peacekeeping vessel, the ultimate deterrent. But even then, I sensed the lie. Weeks passed. I learned the rhythms of the station, the shifts, the protocols. I excelled at my duties, earning grudging approval from Vanth and the respect of my peers. But beneath the professional satisfaction grew a creeping unease. Officers disappeared without explanation. One day present, the next gone, their names unmentionable. Rumors spread in whispers. Reassignment, they said officially, but the looks exchanged told a different story. Corlin, a fellow lieutenant who had become something of a friend, was the first I knew personally to vanish. We had taken meals together, shared complaints about the rigid protocols. Then one morning, his station stood empty. When I inquired, Vanth fixed me with a cold stare. Lieutenant Corlin has been reassigned. Focus on your duties, Lieutenant Solon. That evening, I returned to my quarters to find them searched. Nothing obvious, but I could feel it. Items minutely out of place. The terminal access log wiped too cleanly. A warning, perhaps, or standard procedure. Either way, the message was clear. We were all being watched. Sleep became elusive. In the artificial night cycle, I would lie awake, listening to the station breathe, feeling it pulse around me. Sometimes, in the deepest hours, I swore I could hear voices in the ventilation system. Whispers just below the threshold of understanding. Fragments of conversation, or perhaps just the machine noises of a station housing nearly 2 million souls. During one such restless night, my terminal chimed. An unscheduled shift change. I was to report to Sector N6 for an emergency systems evaluation. Strange. N6 was not in my jurisdiction. Still, orders were orders. I dressed quickly and made my way through the night cycle corridors, eerily empty save for patrolling stormtroopers who watched my passage without comment. N6 proved to be a restricted area, its entryway guarded by death troopers, their black armor absorbing the harsh white light of the corridor. My credentials were checked thoroughly before I was admitted. Inside, I found not a power distribution center but a security monitoring station, and waiting for me was not Vanth but a man in the uniform of Imperial Security Bureau. Lieutenant Solon, he said, not bothering to introduce himself. Your performance has been noted. We have additional duties for you. The room contained dozens of monitoring stations, each showing surveillance feeds from throughout the station, private quarters, mess halls, even refreshers. Nothing was sacred, nothing was private. We have concerns about certain elements within the engineering core, the ISB officer continued. You will report any unusual behaviors, conversations, or activities directly to this office. This assignment supersedes all others. They were making me a spy, an informant against my own colleagues. Refusal was not an option. That much was clear from the death troopers positioned at the door. I swallowed hard and nodded. Good. The officer said, though no warmth touched his eyes. Remember, Lieutenant, security is paramount. The success of this station depends on the loyalty of its crew. Dismissed. I returned to my quarters, shaken. Sleep was impossible now. In the sterile darkness, I contemplated my position. To refuse meant disappearance. To accept meant betrayal. There was no third option, not aboard the Death Star. The next day, I performed my duties with mechanical precision while my mind raced. I studied my colleagues with new eyes, wondering if they too had been recruited. Were we all watching each other in an endless loop of paranoia? The thought made me nauseous. During midday meal, I sat alone, pushing protein cubes around my tray. The mess hall hummed with low conversation, everyone careful about what they said and who might be listening. The overhead speakers periodically broadcast Imperial achievements and news from the core worlds. Always positive, always triumphant, the Emperor's wisdom, the declining insurgency, peace spreading throughout the galaxy. A shadow fell across my tray. I looked up to find Captain Revik, a taciturn officer from Weapons Control, standing over me. "Lieutenant Solon," he said, his voice neutral. "I require your assistance with a power fluctuation affecting targeting systems in my section. Will you accompany me?" I had never spoken to Revik before, had barely seen him outside official briefings. Something felt wrong, but refusing would seem suspicious. I followed him through the labyrinthine corridors, noting that we took an unusual route, avoiding main thoroughfares and security checkpoints. "The fluctuation is intermittent," Revik said as we walked, his voice pitched low. "Difficult to diagnose through standard protocols." We entered a maintenance tube, narrow and dimly lit. The moment the access hatch closed behind us, Revik's demeanor changed entirely. The military stiffness fell away, replaced by an urgent intensity. "Listen carefully," he whispered. "We do not have much time. You are being tested, Solon. The ISB suspects dissent in the engineering corps. Your recruitment as an informant is not about finding traitors. It is about determining if you are one." My blood ran cold. "I do not understand." "The station is not what they told us," Revik continued, checking a small device that presumably scanned for listening devices. "It is not a peacekeeping vessel. It is a planet killer, and they are almost ready for the first test." The words seemed to echo in the confined space. A planet killer. The scale of it, the horror, refused to settle in my mind. "How do you know this?" I managed. Revik's face was grim. "Because I have seen the targeting protocols, heard the command discussions. They have selected an inhabited world for the demonstration, millions of lives to prove a point." I felt ill. The vibrations I had felt through the floor since arrival took on a new and terrible meaning. Not the heartbeat of a ship, but the charging of a weapon designed for slaughter on an unimaginable scale. "Why tell me this?" I asked, suddenly aware that this could be another layer of the test. Revik could be ISB himself, probing for my reaction. "Because we need people in power distribution," he said simply. "When the time comes, we will need to act. Not everyone aboard this station is a willing executioner." Resistance. He was talking about resistance. Sabotage. My thoughts must have shown on my face because he gripped my arm hard. "Do not decide now," he said. "Return to your duties. Report nothing of this conversation. When they ask, tell them I showed you a minor power coupling issue and you provided standard diagnostic assistance. Nothing more. Watch. Listen. And when you are ready, place a maintenance request for your quarters, reference code CR2187. We will contact you." Before I could respond, he released me and returned to his formal manner. "Louder, for any listening devices," he said. "Thank you for your assistance, Lieutenant. The fluctuation appears to be stabilized. You may return to your post." I stumbled back to my station, mind reeling. Planet killer, resistance, tests, surveillance, the enormity of it threatened to crush me. I performed my duties by rote, aware that I was likely being observed more closely than ever. That night, lying in my quarters, I finally understood what had been bothering me since arrival. The Death Star was not just a station or a weapon, it was a trap for its own crew. We were all prisoners here, participating in something monstrous, our complicity assured by fear and ambition. The only escape was promotion or death. Or perhaps they were the same thing. Sleep eventually came, but with it, nightmares. I dreamed of planets shattering, of millions of voices crying out in terror, suddenly silenced. I dreamed of endless corridors with no exits, of stormtroopers with my face behind their helmets. I dreamed of the Emperor himself, withered and smiling, watching as I was consumed by the machine I helped maintain. I woke to the sound of my own gasping. The viewport showed only stars, cold and distant. The vibration through the floor continued, unceasing. Building power, building purpose. Somewhere in this station, decisions were being made that would change the galaxy forever. And I was part of it, whether I wished to be or not. Morning came, as it always did, with the harsh buzz of the comm unit. Another day, another shift maintaining the monster. But as I dressed, I noticed something different. My hands were steady, my mind clear. Fear remained, but now it shared space with something else. Resolve. Whatever happened next, I would no longer be a passive observer. I would watch, I would listen, and when the time came, I would decide. The station hummed around me, oblivious to my small rebellion. For now, I straightened my uniform and stepped into the corridor where stormtroopers stood at their eternal vigil. Their blank faces revealed nothing, but I imagined I could feel their eyes tracking me as I walked toward my duty station. One more day aboard the Death Star. One day closer to becoming either complicit or condemned. The lights flickered, briefly as I walked, a rare imperfection in the station's operation. A good omen or a warning, I could not say. Either way, the path ahead was clear only in its danger. I squared my shoulders and continued forward into the heart of the beast. Days blurred together after my encounter with Revik. I performed my duties with mechanical precision, eyes down, voice neutral, the perfect Imperial officer on the surface. Beneath, my thoughts churned like a storm on Camino. Each power diagnostic I ran, each system I maintained, took on new meaning. I was no longer servicing a station, I was feeding a weapon designed for genocide. The surveillance became more obvious, or perhaps I had simply become more attuned to it. Stormtroopers lingered near my station. Colleagues asked unusual questions about my duties, my thoughts on station efficiency. Probe droids drifted past my quarters at irregular intervals. I gave them nothing. I kept to myself, spoke only of work, and waited. A week passed before I placed the maintenance request. Reference code CR2187. My hand barely trembled as I entered it into the system. Done. If Revik was genuine, they would contact me. If it was a trap, I had just signed my own disappearance order. 2 days later, I received transfer orders. Temporary assignment to the superlaser control sectors for power alignment protocols. My breath caught. The superlaser, the planet killer itself. Was this the response to my coded message, or simply the next phase in whatever test the ISB had devised for me? The superlaser control sectors occupied the most restricted areas of the station: Kyber crystal chambers, energy-focusing arrays, targeting systems, the heart of the abomination. Security was oppressive. Retinal scans, voice confirmation, multiple checkpoints manned by elite troops. My palm was slick with sweat by the time I reached my assigned station. The chamber was vast, dominated by a circular targeting display. Officers moved with tense purpose. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation. Something was happening. Director Krennic himself was present, along with a towering figure in black that made my blood freeze. Darth Vader, the Emperor's enforcer. His breathing, mechanical and rhythmic, filled the enormous room despite its size. No one looked directly at him. I was directed to a power monitoring station by a nervous lieutenant who seemed relieved to have someone take his place. As I familiarized myself with the systems, I realized with growing horror that this was not a drill or a system test. The superlaser was being prepared for activation. The weapon was ready. The only question was the target. Hours passed in tense silence. I monitored power levels, made minor adjustments, and tried to appear focused solely on my duties while absorbing everything around me. Snippets of conversation reached me, a demonstration, unprecedented power, a message to the Senate. A Governor Tarkin was mentioned repeatedly, apparently overseeing the operation. Then came the announcement: all personnel to remain at battle stations. The station was moving out of the asteroid field where it had been concealed during final construction. We were underway to the location of the demonstration. My mouth went dry. It was happening, and I was part of it. The journey took 3 days. 3 days of heightened alert, minimal sleep rotations, and growing tension. Rumors spread despite the security lockdown. The target was a prison planet. No, a rebel base. No, an uninhabited moon. No one knew for certain, or if they did, they were not sharing the information with mere lieutenants. On the third day, we dropped out of hyperspace. The targeting display illuminated with a blue and green world. Alderaan. My heart stopped. Not a prison planet or a military installation. Alderaan, a core world, peaceful, populous, billions of souls. A hush fell over the control room as Governor Tarkin entered, his gaunt face set in lines of cold determination. With him came a young woman in white, her hands bound. I recognized her from Senate broadcasts, Princess Leia Organa of Alderaan herself, a prisoner being forced to witness the destruction of her home. I could not hear the exchange between Tarkin and the princess. I was too far away, and the blood pounding in my ears drowned out everything but my own horror. But I saw her face, the shock, the pleading, and I saw Tarkin's thin smile as he gave the order, "Commence primary ignition." The command echoed through the chamber, relayed through multiple stations. My console flashed with activation protocols. My hands moved without conscious direction, performing the tasks I had been trained for. Power alignments, energy distribution, feeding the beast that was about to devour a world. Through the massive viewport, I could see the planet suspended in space, beautiful and unaware. The station vibrated as power built within its core. On my screens, energy levels climbed toward critical thresholds. The kyber crystals channeled power no Imperial scientist fully understood, creating a reaction that could not be stopped once initiated. A series of tones indicated final firing sequence. A commander called out, "Power levels. 100%, optimal range, target locked." I wanted to scream, to sabotage my station, to do something, anything. But I was frozen, a cog in the machine, watching in mute horror as the culmination of our labors unleashed itself upon the innocent. The superlaser fired. 8 separate beams converged into one massive column of destructive energy. The beam struck Alderaan dead center. For a moment, the planet seemed to absorb the blast, its surface rippling like water. Then came the shattering. No words can adequately describe the destruction of a world. The planet did not simply explode, it disintegrated. Continents, oceans, mountains, cities, all reduced to their component atoms in seconds. The shockwave rippled out in a perfect sphere of debris and energy. Where Alderaan had been, only an expanding cloud of dust and rock remained. In the control room, cheers erupted, actual cheers. Officers congratulated each other, shook hands, clapped shoulders. Tarkin smiled, his death's head smile. Only Vader remained unmoved, his masked face revealing nothing of what thoughts might lie behind it. I felt the room spin around me, billions of lives, gone, snuffed out by the machine I had helped create. I gripped my console to remain upright, fighting the urge to vomit. Through the haze of my shock, I became aware of something terrible, something I would never escape. I had felt them die, not in any mystical sense, I am no Jedi, but through the power monitoring systems, through the energy readings that spiked and then flatlined, through the sudden silence of planetary communications that had been background noise on our sensors. I had experienced the death of Alderaan with a technician's intimacy. I had witnessed its life signs wink out, translated into the cold language of data. "Impressive display, Lieutenant." The voice snapped me back to the moment. An officer I did not recognize stood beside my station, watching me with calculating eyes. ISB, almost certainly, monitoring my reaction. I swallowed hard and managed to respond, "Yes, sir." The power conversion efficiency exceeded projections. He studied me a moment longer, then nodded almost imperceptibly before moving on to observe another technician. I had passed, it seemed. My horror had not been visible enough to mark me as disloyal. The thought made me sick all over again. The shift ended eventually, though time had lost all meaning. I walked back to my quarters through corridors filled with celebrating personnel. The Empire had flexed its might. The Death Star had proven its worth. Drinks flowed freely in the officers' lounges. Music played over some internal communication channels. A holiday atmosphere. I locked my quarters and finally allowed myself to break. I barely made it to the refresher before emptying my stomach. When there was nothing left, I sank to the floor, trembling uncontrollably. Alderaan was gone, billions dead, and I had helped make it happen. My engineering, my maintenance, my compliance. The water from the sink did nothing to wash away the taste of complicity. I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the face that stared back. Pale, hollow-eyed, the face of a mass murderer. Sleep was impossible. I sat at my small desk, staring at nothing, replaying the destruction in my mind. The blue-green world, the beam, the shattering, over and over and over. At some point I became aware of my terminal blinking with a new message. Maintenance request CR2187 approved, servicing scheduled for 0300 hours. The Resistance, Revik, I had almost forgotten. Would they still act now, after the weapon had already been fired? What purpose would it serve? Yet I found myself watching the chronometer, waiting for 0300 hours with a strange detachment. Nothing mattered anymore. Not really, but I would hear what they had to say. The soft knock came precisely on schedule. I opened the door to find a maintenance worker, face partially obscured by a cap tool case in hand. Ventilation issue reported in these quarters? The worker said, loud enough to be heard by any surveillance. Yes, I replied mechanically. Intermittent noise in the circulation system. The worker entered, set down the tool case, and immediately produced a small device that emitted a soft hum. Signal jammer, surveillance countermeasure. For a few precious minutes, we could speak freely. The worker removed her cap. A woman in her 40s, with close-cropped grey hair and eyes that had seen too much. I am Commander Merrick, she said without preamble. Revik sent me. We do not have much time. What is there to do now? I asked, my voice hollow. The weapon has fired. Alderaan is gone. And it will fire again, she said sharply. And again. Tarkin has the Emperor's ear. The Senate has been dissolved. There will be no limits to what they do with this station. The truth of her words penetrated my shock. Alderaan was just the beginning. Listen carefully, Merrick continued. There is a rebel cell operating aboard this station, small, carefully placed. We cannot stop what has already happened, but we can ensure it does not happen again. How? The station plans, weaknesses, vulnerabilities. The rebels need this information if they are to have any hope of countering this monstrosity. She produced a data chip from inside her maintenance uniform, complete technical readouts of the station, reactor specifications, defensive systems, everything. We need to get this to the Rebel Alliance. I stared at the chip, such a small thing to carry such enormous consequences. Why me? I asked. Because you have access to the transmission systems in your sector, because Revik vouched for you, because we saw your face when Alderaan died. Her eyes softened slightly. Not everyone cheered, Lieutenant Solon. I took the chip, its weight almost burning my palm. How do I transmit it? All communications are monitored. Not all, she said. There is a blind spot in the monitoring systems during maintenance cycles on the communication arrays. A small window where unauthorized transmissions can be masked as system diagnostics. You will receive the schedule and protocols. When the moment comes, you must be ready. The jammer beeped softly. Our time was running out. If I am caught, I said, it will not just be reassignment. No, she agreed grimly. It will not. But ask yourself, Lieutenant, can you continue to serve this station knowing what it has done? What it will do again? The answer was simple. I could not. The faces of Alderaan's dead would haunt me forever. I could not add more to their number through my inaction. I will do it, I said. Merrick nodded once, replaced her cap, and disabled the jammer. In a louder voice she said, ventilation appears normal now. Must have been a temporary obstruction. Sign here to confirm service completion. I signed the data pad she offered, my hand steadier than it had been all day. As she packed her tools, she leaned closer. "When this is over," she whispered, "remember that you had a choice, and you made the right one." Then she was gone, leaving me alone with the data chip and the weight of my decision. I hid the chip inside my boot heel, a compartment designed for officers to store emergency currency or small valuables. Then I lay on my bunk, staring at the ceiling, waiting for morning and whatever it might bring. Sleep eventually came, but with it, the screams of Alderaan. I woke bathed in sweat, the echo of billions still ringing in my ears. But now, alongside the horror, burned a small flame of purpose. I would not bring Alderaan back, but perhaps I could prevent the next atrocity. It was not redemption, but it was something. I reported for duty as usual, the data chip concealed in my boot, its presence a constant reminder of what I had committed to. The station had shifted to normal operations following the successful demonstration. Engineering teams were running full diagnostics on the superlaser systems to assess performance and prepare for potential additional deployments. The mood throughout the station had changed. Fear remained, but now it mixed with a terrible pride. We had done the unthinkable, and the galaxy had trembled. I heard officers speaking casually of other potential targets. Rebel worlds, non-compliant systems, planets with resources the Empire desired. The Death Star was no longer a theoretical deterrent. It was a proven executioner, and those who controlled it were drunk on their newfound power. 3 days passed before I received the transmission protocols. A standard maintenance notification, but with embedded code that detailed the communication array schedule, the security blind spots, and the transmission protocols that would mask the data as routine system diagnostics. The window would occur during my next shift, a brief period when the primary communication arrays would undergo automated alignment. I would have exactly 7 minutes to transmit the data to a specific set of coordinates provided in the message. The transmission would appear to be standard diagnostic patterns to any monitoring systems. Unless someone was specifically looking for it, the data would slip through unnoticed. I prepared carefully, memorizing the procedures, then destroying the instructions. The data chip remained in my boot, a constant pressure against my ankle. My heart raced every time I passed a security checkpoint, certain that at any moment I would be stopped, searched, discovered. But nothing happened. The station was vast, its security forces stretched thin, monitoring millions of personnel. One lieutenant among thousands merited little special attention. The day of the transmission arrived. I reported for duty as normal, performed my tasks with practiced efficiency. Around me, the power distribution center hummed with activity. Engineers and technicians moved from station to station, monitoring the great machine that had become our home and our prison. I checked the chronometer repeatedly, watching the minutes tick away toward the maintenance window. 30 minutes before the scheduled transmission, alarms blared throughout the station. Not fire or decompression warnings, but battle stations. The Death Star was moving to combat alert. All personnel to security positions, rebel ships detected in the vicinity. My blood ran cold. Had the transmission been discovered before I even sent it? Was this a trap? Or had the rebels launched a desperate, suicidal attack with no knowledge of the station's vulnerabilities? The command channels filled with updates. A small group of rebel fighters had appeared in the system. Impossibly, they were attacking the station directly. Turbolaser batteries were responding. TIE fighters were being deployed. The rebels had no capital ships, just a handful of one-man fighters. It seemed absurd, yet the alert level continued to rise. Through it all, the maintenance schedule remained unchanged. The communication arrays still required alignment, battle or no battle. My window was still open if I could reach the transmission subsystems, but security would be heightened, movements restricted during battle stations. I made my decision. Using the confusion of the alert, I requisitioned a portable diagnostic unit, citing emergency power distribution checks for defensive systems. No one questioned me. Everyone was focused on battle stations, on the impossible attack occurring outside. With the diagnostic unit in hand, I made my way to the auxiliary communication control room adjacent to my usual station. It would be minimally staffed during battle stations, with most personnel directed to primary systems. The auxiliary room was empty when I arrived, its occupants presumably reassigned to more critical areas. Perfect. I sealed the door and moved quickly to the main terminal. The diagnostic unit would allow me to interface with the communications array under the guise of emergency system checks. I removed the data chip from my boot and inserted it into the reader. Outside, the battle continued. I could feel occasional tremors through the station structures, likely impact tremors from near misses or point defense interceptions. The rebels were being destroyed, according to status updates scrolling across secondary monitors, their attack failing. I had to hurry. The maintenance window opened. I began the transmission sequence, disguising the data stream as standard diagnostic patterns. On my screen, progress indicators crawled forward with excruciating slowness. The complete technical readouts of the Death Star, flowing out into space toward coordinates where, hopefully, someone waited to receive them. A proximity alarm on the door gave me 3 seconds warning someone was entering. No time to abort the transmission, no time to hide what I was doing. I braced myself, hand moving toward my sidearm, though what I expected to accomplish against security forces I could not say. The door slid open to reveal not security but Revik. His uniform was disheveled, his face streaked with what looked like soot. "Solon," he gasped, "we must go. Now." "The transmission," I started. "It is not complete." "It is complete enough," he said, moving to the terminal and checking the progress. "They have what they need. The rebel attack is not random. It is cover for our extraction." My mind struggled to process his words. "Extraction." "Those of us who can be saved," he said grimly. "The cell is compromised. Merrick was captured 2 hours ago. She will break eventually. Everyone breaks under Imperial interrogation. We have a narrow window to reach the evacuation point." I stared at him, torn between finishing the transmission and the sudden, unexpected possibility of escape. Not just resistance, but actual freedom from the Death Star. Revik made the decision for me, terminating the transmission and ejecting the data chip. 70% transmitted, he said. "It will have to be enough. Come. We have 3 minutes to reach the emergency evacuation pods in Sector 4. I followed him into the corridor, mind racing. The pods are monitored. Security will lock them down during battle stations. "Not all of them," Revik said as we hurried through surprisingly empty corridors. The battle had drawn security away from internal monitoring, it seemed. Maintenance pods, designed for exterior repairs during combat situations. Limited life support, but enough to get clear of the station. We reached a maintenance accessway and descended through narrow utility shafts, rarely used by regular personnel. The route was disorienting, taking us through parts of the station I had never seen. Twice we froze as patrols passed nearby. Once we were forced to backtrack when we found our path blocked by emergency containment doors. "Here," Revik said finally, stopping before an unmarked hatchway. "Maintenance pod access. Once inside, we will have approximately 20 seconds before automated systems register the launch. By then, we should be beyond tractor beam range if we time our entry into the firefight correctly." "The rebels know to expect us?" I asked, still struggling to believe escape was possible. Revik's face tightened. "They know to expect someone. Whether they can retrieve us depends on how many survive the battle." He operated the access panel, revealing a small chamber containing what looked like miniature escape pods. Utilitarian, cramped, designed for function rather than comfort. "1 pod per person," Revik instructed. "Automated controls. They will take us to the predetermined coordinates. If we become separated, head for the gas giant in this system. The rebels have a rendezvous point on the 3rd moon." I moved toward the nearest pod, hope rising for the first time in days. Freedom. Escape from the Death Star. From complicity. From the nightmares of Alderaan. The blaster shot came without warning. Revok jerked, a smoking hole appearing in his chest. He crumpled without a sound. I spun, drawing my own sidearm, to find myself facing 3 stormtroopers and an ISB officer, the same one who had observed me after Alderaan's destruction. "Lieutenant Solon," the officer said calmly, "you disappoint me. I had such hopes for your career." I fired without thinking. The blaster bolt struck the officer in the shoulder, spinning him back. The stormtroopers returned fire immediately. I dove for cover behind a equipment console, shots sizzling past my head. One caught my arm, burning through the uniform sleeve and searing the flesh beneath. The pain was distant, secondary to the desperate need to survive, to escape. I fired again, catching a stormtrooper in the faceplate. He fell, but the others kept coming, spreading out to flank me. The maintenance pod stood open just meters away. Freedom within reach, yet impossibly distant. A barrage of blaster fire forced me deeper into cover. The edge of the console melted under the assault, acrid smoke filling the small chamber. My options were rapidly disappearing. In seconds, they would have me surrounded. The station shuddered suddenly, more violently than before. Not a near miss this time, a direct hit. The lights flickered, emergency systems engaging. The distraction was minimal, but it was enough. I lunged for the maintenance pod, diving headfirst into the cramped space as blaster fire traced my path. The hatch sealed automatically behind me. Through the small viewport, I saw the stormtroopers advancing, weapons raised. The ISB officer was shouting into a comlink, likely calling for the pod systems to be locked down. I had seconds, if that. I slammed my palm against the emergency launch control. The pod shuddered, locking mechanisms disengaging. The last thing I saw through the viewport was the ISB officer's face, contorted with fury. Then acceleration pressed me back as the pod ejected from the station. Space opened around me, beautiful and terrible. The battle came into focus as the pod's minimal systems oriented me. Impossibly, a handful of rebel fighters still darted between massive turbolaser batteries, evading the Death Star's defenses and the swarms of TIE fighters. They seemed to be making attack runs on a specific area, though what damage such small craft could hope to inflict on the massive station was beyond my comprehension. My pod tumbled away from the Death Star's surface, automated systems struggling to stabilize against the shockwaves of nearby explosions. On the small control panel, warning indicators flashed red. I had been right. The station was already tracking the unauthorized launch, targeting systems locking onto the pod. In moments, a turbolaser battery would swat me from existence. The comm system crackled to life. Unidentified maintenance pod, this is Gold Leader. Transmit recognition code immediately. A rebel pilot, the promised extraction. My hands shook as I entered the code Revok had given me, praying it was still valid despite his death. Seconds stretched into eternity as I waited for a response. The pod's sensors showed the Death Star's targeting systems narrowing their focus. I closed my eyes, certain I had escaped the station only to die in space. "Code confirmed," came the response. "Adjust trajectory to coordinates being transmitted. We will provide cover. Stand by for pickup." Hope surged. I engaged the pod's maneuvering thrusters, aligning to the provided coordinates. Through the viewport, I saw a Y-wing fighter break formation, diving toward my position. Behind it, the battle intensified. The remaining rebel craft seemed to be concentrating their attacks on a specific meridian trench of the station, drawing fire and attention away from my escape. The Death Star grew smaller behind me, though not nearly small enough. Its immense bulk still dominated space, a moon-sized abomination that had consumed 2 years of my life and would forever haunt my dreams. My pod continued accelerating away, the Y-wing paralleling my course. "Maintenance pod, prepare for tractor lock." The rebel pilot transmitted. "Our window is closing. All craft must jump to hyperspace in 90 seconds. The Y-wing maneuvered above me, a small tractor beam extending to capture my pod. I felt the change in momentum as the fighter took control, tucking the pod against its underbelly like a strange remora. "Secure for acceleration," the pilot advised. "This will not be a comfortable ride." I braced myself as best I could in the confined space. Through the viewport, I could see other rebel fighters breaking off their attack, pulling away from the Death Star's surface. Whatever their mission had been, it was either completed or abandoned. The remaining fighters formed up, preparing for the jump to light speed. A new voice broke over the comm channel, urgent and filled with a desperate kind of hope. "All craft, mission accomplished. Repeat, mission accomplished. Break off and make the jump to the rendezvous coordinates." Mission accomplished. What had they done? The Death Star still loomed behind us, apparently undamaged despite the rebel attack. What possible victory could these few fighters claim against such overwhelming power? The answer came seconds later. The Death Star erupted. Not just a section or a specific system, the entire station. A chain reaction of explosions rippled across its surface, spreading from a central point with impossible speed. For a heartbeat, the structure held, as if the station's immense mass could contain even this catastrophe. Then came the final detonation. The viewport automatically darkened as a new sun bloomed where the Death Star had been. The shockwave hit moments later, sending my pod and the Y-wing carrying it tumbling through space. Warning alarms shrieked as the pod's systems overloaded. The last thing I remembered was the sensation of acceleration as the Y-wing jumped to hyperspace, tearing us away from the expanding cloud of debris that had once been the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. I awoke in a medical bay aboard what I would later learn was a rebel transport ship. My injured arm had been treated, though it would bear the scar of the blaster burn forever, a mark of my escape, of my survival when so many had not. They debriefed me extensively. Every detail of the station, its protocols, its weaknesses. Though it no longer existed, the information was valuable. The Empire might build another, might already be planning it. My knowledge, combined with the partial schematics I had transmitted, might one day prove vital again. I learned what had happened in those final moments. A single rebel pilot had managed to fire a proton torpedo into a vulnerable exhaust port, triggering a chain reaction in the main reactor. One shot, guided by skill or luck or something more, had accomplished what seemed impossible. The Death Star was gone, Tarkin with it. Vader had apparently escaped, his TIE fighter detected leaving the system before the explosion. The victory was not without cost. Most of the rebel attack force had been destroyed, and Alderaan remained dust, its people extinguished in a moment of imperial cruelty. No triumph could undo that atrocity. In the quiet hours between debriefings, I found myself standing before viewports, staring out at the stars. The universe seemed both larger and smaller now. I had helped build a weapon that destroyed worlds. I had watched it fire. I had felt the deaths of billions through cold data readings, and I had played a small part in its destruction. None of it seemed entirely real, yet the nightmares that came each time I closed my eyes confirmed the truth of it all. One evening, a rebel officer found me at my usual viewport vigil. She stood beside me in silence for a time, respecting the gravity of thoughts she could not fully comprehend. "The Alliance Council has reviewed your case," she said finally. "You have been granted asylum and provisional status within the rebellion. Your technical expertise will be valuable in the coming conflict." I nodded, unsurprised. Where else could I go? The Empire would hunt me as a traitor, and after what I had witnessed, what I had been part of, neutrality was no longer an option. "There is something else you should know," she continued. "The transmission you sent, it was incomplete, but critical. Without those technical readouts, the fighter squadrons would never have identified the exhaust port vulnerability. Your action saved countless lives, Lieutenant Solon. Worlds that would have followed Alderaan into oblivion still exist because of what you did." Her words were meant as comfort, perhaps even absolution, but the weight of Alderaan remained, would always remain. "I helped build it," I said softly. "Every day I worked on its systems, improved its efficiency, made it better at killing. I knew something was wrong, felt it from the first day. But I continued, followed orders, maintained the machine. And when the moment came to choose, she replied, "You chose to act. That matters." Did it? I was not certain. Redemption seemed too much to hope for, but purpose, perhaps that was possible. Using what I knew to ensure no other world would suffer Alderaan's fate. It would have to be enough. "When do I begin?" I asked. "Tomorrow," she said. "We have intelligence that the Empire is developing new weapons platforms. Your insights into their engineering protocols will be invaluable." Of course they were. The Death Star was gone, but the Empire's appetite for dominance remained insatiable. There would be other weapons, other atrocities in planning. The work would never end. I thought of Revik, dying to give me a chance at escape. Of Merrick, captured and undoubtedly executed after the station's destruction, of the billions on Alderaan who had no chance at all. Their ghosts would walk with me always. "I will be ready," I said. That night, for the first time since Alderaan, I slept without nightmares. Not because the horror had diminished or the guilt had eased, but because exhaustion had finally claimed its due. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new responsibilities. The war continued, with or without the Death Star. I am Lieutenant Arik Solan, former Imperial Systems Engineer, now analyst for the Rebel Alliance. This is my testimony, a record of what I witnessed aboard the Death Star, from its cold corridors to its fiery end. Perhaps no one will ever read these words. Perhaps they will be lost in the greater history of the conflict between Empire and Rebellion. It does not matter. I write them not for posterity but for the dead, for Alderaan, for the truth. The Death Star was more than a weapon. It was a prison for its builders, a trap for our souls. It consumed us long before it consumed its targets. In its sterile corridors and perfect order, we became extensions of its purpose. Cogs in a machine designed for slaughter on an unimaginable scale. Some embraced this transformation willingly, intoxicated by the power it offered. Others, like myself, sleepwalked into complicity, following orders, maintaining systems, avoiding questions that might disturb our carefully constructed denial. In the end, the Death Star died as it lived, in violence and fire. But its shadow remains, cast long across the galaxy and across my dreams. A monument to the darkness possible when technology serves tyranny without conscience or constraint. A warning to those who would follow in its wake. I survived its destruction, escaped its gravitational pull, both literal and moral. But I will never be free of it, nor should I be. Someone must remember, someone must bear witness. Someone must speak for the silenced worlds and the corrupted souls caught in the Empire's machinery of death. That burden is mine now, a life sentence passed by my own conscience. I accept it without complaint. It is far less than I deserve. The stars beyond the viewport seem different now, knowing what I know, having seen what I have seen. Each one represents not just light and potential, but vulnerability. Worlds turning in innocence beneath alien suns, unaware of the weapons being forged in darkness. Of the men in sterile rooms plotting their destruction with the same detachment I once brought to power distribution calculations. The rebellion fights to preserve those worlds, to ensure that no more Alderaans illuminate the void with their dying. It is a worthy cause, perhaps the only one left to me. I will serve it as best I can, with the knowledge bought at such terrible cost. The Death Star is gone, but what it represented remains. The hunger for absolute power, the willingness to extinguish life on a planetary scale to achieve political ends. These do not die with a single station, no matter how powerful. They must be fought wherever they emerge, with vigilance and sacrifice, and the determination to remember what happens when they go unchallenged. This is my testimony, my confession, my promise to the dead. I will remember. I will bear witness. I will never again close my eyes to what is being built around me. The Empire will build another Death Star, Perhaps it is already under construction in some remote system, hidden from prying eyes. The hunger that spawned the first will not be satisfied by its destruction. It will learn from its failures, address the vulnerabilities, create something even more terrible. And we will be waiting, those of us who know, those of us who have seen the truth behind imperial might, those of us who carry the ghosts of Alderaan in our hearts, and the determination that they shall be the last to die in such a manner. The cycle continues, the war goes on. But something has changed. Hope exists where once there was only resignation and fear. The Death Star, the ultimate power in the universe according to its masters, proved vulnerable. The Empire, for all its strength, could not protect its greatest weapon. This is what I cling to in the darkness, this small flame of hope, kindled in the destruction of a nightmare. It is not enough to ease the guilt or silence the screams that echo in my memory, but it is enough to light the path forward, one step at a time, one day at a time, away from the Death Star, away from what I was within its walls. I am Lieutenant Eric Solon. I survived the Death Star, and I will ensure its story is not forgotten.